Sitting in a sleazy snack bar sucking sickly sausage rolls, slipping down slowly, slipping down sideways, think I'll sign off the dole. Yeah, okay, welcome. Now then, Vinyl Monkey here. I've got an hell of a collection of music today, and we'll come back to the sickly sausage rolls shortly, but this is the 16th of May 2021, and tomorrow the 17th is the day where we will be able to sit in a sleazy snack bar sucking sickly sausage rolls, or if you prefer, in a pub with a nice pint of beer, which after my second jab, which is scheduled for 20 to 7 tomorrow evening, which is exactly where I will be. So but yeah, we'll come back to that particular song later, but we're on to the letter L, and I want to start with an absolute classic. This is Love from Forever Changes from 1967. Love, led by Arthur Lee, one of the first and very few ethnically diverse rock bands back in those days, and this was I think it was Love's third album, and I guess everybody who watches this channel will be familiar with this album. It's often rated as one of the top 100 albums of all time. It's in everybody's sort of favourite chart, so it's a well-known LP. It sounds like nothing quite else, I don't think. It's more folky than the first two albums. It's sort of got an acoustic guitar lead, but there's lots of strings, lots of horns, even a mariachi band in there, and it's characterised by sort of dark lyrics but upbeat music, and so that contrast I think is really, really interesting and satisfying. And there are some critics who say that those dark lyrics were sort of Arthur Lee foreseeing the sort of end of the summer of love and the hippie dream, if you like, and yeah, it's different, but it's an absolute classic. There are 11 tracks on this. You can go to, if you, in the very unlikely event that you're not familiar with this album, I would say, well, just go out and buy it. But if you can't get out and buy it, get on the laptop or whatever you do and listen to any of the 11 tracks on this. They're all absolutely stunning and highly, highly recommended. Love, Forever Changes, 1967. Moving from the west coast of America to the northeast coast of England, and this is Lindisfarne, Fog on the Tyne from 1971. And this is Lindisfarne's second album. I could have actually picked any of their first three albums from this collection behind me to hold up, because they're all absolutely great albums, full of brilliant songs. Most of the songs on here are just really, really stunning. I mean, I've already spoken under the letter H about Alan Hull's songwriting talents and his plaintive singing voice that I like so much, and that features very, very heavily on this album. So as I say, I could have picked any of them. The two singles, Meet Me on the Corner and Fog on the Tyne, will be probably known to everybody, but lots and lots of other great tracks. January Song, Peterborough If You Don't Care, City Song, Train in G Major, most of them written by Alan Hull, but one or two contributions from other members of the band. Brilliant album, as are all of their first three albums. That's Nicely Out of Tune and Dingley Dell. That's Lindisfarne, Fog on the Tyne, 1971. The third album is by the American band Little Feat. And this is Sailing Shoes from 1972. Fantastic cover, I think. It's sort of surreal sort of art with I think it's meant to be a cake with a woman's legs on some sort of swing, and a tree here with a sort of horse's hoof and an eyeball there. But this cover's by a guy called Neon Parks, an artist who did many album covers for people from Bowie to the Beach Boys to Frank Zappa, in fact. But this is Little Feat, and it's their second album. And Little Feat, led by a really multi-talented, multi-instrumentalist singer, songwriter called Lowell George. And Lowell George actually, he started off as in Frank Zappa's backing band, the Mothers of Invention. And the story goes that the track that you'll probably be most familiar with from this album, Willin', was allegedly the reason why he left the Mothers of Invention and formed his own band. One story goes is that he played the song to Zappa, and Zappa encouraged him because the song was so good to form his own band. The other story is that Zappa actually sacked him because the song was so good, and he seen it as a threat. But anyway, whether there's any truth in those or it's somewhere in between, I don't know. But you will be familiar with that song, from Tucson to Tucumcari, Tehachapi to Tonopah, driven every kind of rig that's ever been made, driven the back roads so I wouldn't get weighed, and if you give me weed, whites and wine and show me a sign, I'll be willing. That is probably on record as the worst ever attempt to portray that classic song that exists on the World Wide Web. Yeah, I hope you appreciate that. But that song, yeah, became a bit of an anthem for truckers. I think it was about a trucker driving around in the borderlands between Mexico and Texas, and smuggling people and booze and fags and whatever, and drugs across the border. That's, yeah, it characterises this album. It's got a really southern feel to it, although Lowell George and most of the band, I think, actually lived in or were from Los Angeles region. It sounds to me very much like a sort of from the deep south of the USA, the music on here. But great music. Look up that song and remember how good it is. That's Willin'. But the album is Sailing Shoes, from Little Feat. And sadly, about 6 years after this, Lowell George died. He had difficulties with addiction, with heroin, cocaine and binge eating, and apparently he ballooned up to 23 stone. I don't think he was that big of a fella, but he was 23 stone, and the story goes that the final straw was some sort of giant-sized pizza which he'd got. They were on the road, he was touring again, and they'd all stopped for a pizza, and he got the biggest one they did, and he got every extra topping, went to the back of the bus and ate it on his own, and the story goes that's what did it for him. But sadly he died aged just 34. But anyway, yeah, a really talented guy, good songwriter. Lowell George, the leader of Little Feat, Sailing Shoes, 1972. The next album is Philip Lynott. It's down there as Philip Lynott, not Phil Lynott as you might know him. And this is Philip's first solo album. He was actually still, Thin Lizzy was still together, and he made a couple of solo albums. This is called Solo in Soho, and it's a sort of gentler, more reflective style than Thin Lizzy perhaps, and I've always liked Thin Lizzy. I seen them. They were the first ever band I seen. It was 1972. I was 14. Paper round money, I guess. Got tickets to see Slade at Newcastle City Hall, and Slade were fantastic, but Slade was supported by the then unheard of, or by me unheard of, Thin Lizzy. They'd never had any hits. It was a year before the Whiskey in the Jar hit, and I was just absolutely blown away with them. And I did go and see them later on again, later in the 70s, when they were, you know, when they'd had a lot of hits and The Boys Are Back in Town and all that stuff. But as I say, this is a sort of gentler, more reflective album, but some really good songs, particularly the Dear Miss Lonely Hearts and King's Call. The first two songs on the album. King's Call is his tribute to Elvis. It's not a perfect album, I don't think. I think he tries to cover a lot of different sort of styles in here, and sometimes it's maybe a little bit disjointed, but it is a good album, and there are some really good songs on it. And who could fail to be a fan of Philip Lynott? I think all round good guy and great performer and songwriter. So Philip Lynott, Solo in Soho from 1980. And then lastly, under the letter L, one of my favourite bands, the Lemonheads. This is Lick from 1989, and this is their third and last album that they did on the independent label before they moved into the big time on the Atlantic label. And I think their first three albums were, you know, quite a punky, grungy sort of feel. This was the last album before Ben Dealey, one of the joint founders of the band, moved on, leaving Evan Dando as the main singer-songwriter. And after this album they moved on to a much more melodic, softer, sort of more summery sort of sounding style. But this album, although it is punky and grungy, there are plenty of signs of that more melodic stuff which followed this in here. I think it's a great album. A good example of the style is their cover on this album of Suzanne Vega's Luca, which is really, really good if you want to look that one up. But if you're new to the Lemonheads, I possibly wouldn't start here. I would start with one of their three albums which followed this. That's goodness me, I'm having a yeah, It's a Shame About Ray from 1992, Come On Feel the Lemonheads from the year after that, or Car Button Cloth from about 95 or so. I think any of those three, but particularly the first one, It's a Shame About Ray, absolutely brilliant and full of summery, poppy, punky songs that'll just make you smile. Yeah, one of my favourite bands, the Lemonheads, Lick from 1989. Okay, so that's it from the letter L. Hope everybody's okay as we move into the next stage of lockdown restrictions being removed. Enjoy a pint in the pub this week if you can. Okay, cheers.